we're looking at must start and sit running backs for week 6 of the fantasy football season. Every matchup, all 30 teams who are playing this week, all within 30 minutes, hopefully, or less. Keep in mind, the Packers and Steelers are on bye this week, so you'll have no Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, Najee Harris, and Jaylen Warren. Not sure you would have wanted to start 3 of those 4 guys anyway. But we're going to go through every matchup, so let's not waste any time. The first matchup we will look at is Thursday Night Football, Broncos at Chiefs. The over-under is 51.5 points, and the Chiefs are favored at home. This is the largest over-under of the week. So, according to Vegas, this will be maybe where the most fantasy points come from in week 6. The Broncos currently allow the most points to the running back position. So, a start of the week for me this week, a must start of the week, if you will, Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco has exceeded personally all of my expectations I had for him so far this year. He's the RB12 through 5 weeks. And in the last 3 weeks, keep in mind, guys, this was a running back who was not in camp much. He was recovering from an injury, so he's kind of just hitting his stride. In the last 3 weeks, he's averaging an elite 19.3 touches per game in this offense. In this offense, the Chiefs offense, if you can get 19 touches per game, I mean, that is hovering on top 12 finish rest of the way. In that time span, by the way, he is 7th in total rushing attempts in the NFL with 51. What is different about the Chiefs offense this year? They are rushing the ball, and Pacheco has a big part to play in that. Now, he is a must start. As for Jerick McKinnon, I know it's the best matchup that you could have, but man, how do you start this guy? Honestly, he scored 17.8 PPR points in week 3 on just 5 touches. Now, outside of that week 3 game, Jet is averaging 3.1 PPR points per game. He's not touching the ball very much at all. I mean, unless you're desperate, I just don't know how you rely on that. Unless he gets into the end zone, he's probably not a good play. As for the Broncos side of the ball, this is really tough, man. This is extremely difficult to really navigate. It's not a good matchup. Let's start there. The Chiefs are 25th in points allowed to the running back position. Javonte Williams has, opposite of Isaiah Pacheco, been a huge disappointment for fantasy this year. RB 43 on the year. Now, some of that isn't his fault. He's been dealing with injuries, but he hasn't scored over 10 points in a single game this year. If he plays, it actually kind of makes this backfield more difficult to project. Am I the only one who believes that? You know, like if you own Jaleel McLaughlin, obviously you don't want Javonte Williams to play, but even if you own both of them, you could make an argument, Javonte, go ahead and sit out, get healthy. So look, if all 3 of these guys are playing, Javonte, Jaleel, and Samaje, I think it's going to be really messy, and I'm not sure you're going to get a player who has over 10 points. And if there is someone who's over 10 points, I'm not sure you're really going to pick who it is. It could be Pirine on the goal line. It could be Javonte if he's back. It could be Jaleel off of that efficiency that we've seen so far. Speaking of Jaleel McLaughlin, he goes, if Javonte misses this game, he will go from a risky start into the must-start category. He has exceeded my expectations. You know, I'll hold my hands up and say I was wrong on him. I did not think that he would be doing what he's currently doing with Javonte out. He wasn't someone I was excited about starting last week versus the Jets, but I think that game and the game before that have proven to us that this is an efficient player who doesn't need that many touches to make an impact on the game. RB7 on the week here in week 5, and RB10 the week before versus the Chicago Bears. Since Javonte has been injured, he's averaging 11.5 touches per game, almost 100 yards a game, and a touchdown a game, including 18.7 PPR points per game. Again, the ideal scenario here is that Javonte does not play, and then you can start Jaleel with confidence. But outside of that, man, there's just a lot of confusion in that backfield, and if all 3 of those guys are playing, I just don't know that I really want a part of it. So let's hope we get a lot of points from that game. All right, the second matchup we will look at today is the London game. London Town, eh? What do you guys think of these London games? Let me know in the comments below. I mean, not at a convenient time for me where we live, but some people love it, some people hate it. Let me know what you think. We got the Ravens at the Titans in London Town. 41 points is the over-under, and the Ravens are favored. Shouldn't really be that much of a surprise. Now, we have to keep in mind that, you know, some teams have been off their game in London, okay? The Jags had a great game last week, right, for fantasy, but the week before was pretty average. And yet we have to keep in mind that these teams are traveling, and jet lag is a problem. just being in a different country, you're not as rested as you once were, maybe. So maybe just lower expectations a little bit across the board. But let's start with the Ravens. They face the Titans, who before this week were a very difficult matchup. But Zach Moss somehow went nuclear against them. They are now middle of the pack against fantasy running backs. They're not a bad matchup. They're not a good one. I'm, however, going to lean on the side that the Titans are more what we saw defensively through weeks 1 to 4 rather than what we saw in weeks 5. I think this is a tough matchup for these Ravens. And this backfield is kind of a mess if we're honest, right? Justice Hill looks like the running back to own, but each running back's usage is quite inconsistent so far. Last week, Justice Hill, that was his first game back from injury where he was fully healthy. He had 11 touches, including 4 targets, and Gus Edwards had 12 touches on the game, but went back to that role of not being targeted at all in the air. Oddly enough, Justice Hill is getting the important touches for fantasy. He gets the targets, and despite being the smaller back, he also gets the goal line opportunities. I mean, you would think Gus Edwards at 6'1", 238 would be getting the goal line touches, but so far this year, when Justice has been healthy, he's been taking that role. So if you have to start one of these guys, it would be Justice Hill for me, but I'm honestly not really excited for either of these guys. And, if either of them get over 10 points, I think you should be happy with that. So overall, I would say you're going to sit Gus Edwards because he's just not involved in the air. He doesn't have the goal line work. And Justice Hill, look, he's like a flex at best for me this week. For the Titans side of the ball, this is a relatively difficult matchup. The Ravens are 21st in points allowed to the running back position. Derrick Henry, I'm going to keep him in the must-start category. Now, if you guys have been with this channel for quite some time, I've been encouraging you to sell this guy all offseason. Before week 1 began, sell Derrick Henry. After week 1, after week 2, when he had a good game, sell Derrick Henry. This is not looking good this year for many reasons. So hopefully you were able to do that because we are no longer seeing the usage that we are used to with Derrick Henry. His rushing attempts per game, check this out. You can see this on your screen. This is the lowest amount of attempts per game that Derrick Henry has had in the last 5 years. And it is now all coming down to game script for Derrick Henry. In positive game scripts, he'll be a great fantasy asset. But in negative game scripts, you might end up regret starting him, okay? I don't see the Ravens blowing out the Titans personally, okay? This is the same Ravens team that just lost to the Steelers and the Colts in overtime. That's why I'm saying Derrick Henry is a must start. We know what he's capable of. I don't think this is going to be a blowout. It'll be a competitive game. He will be involved. But again, we need to remove any sort of, past bias of Henry being a top 5 back. He's not. He's a fringe top 12, maybe mid RB2 at this point of his career, especially with Tajay Spears looking as good as he's looked. Tajay Spears, a risky start, his first and only game over 10 points last week because he got into the end zone. He's been efficient. He's looked great. He's looked explosive, dynamic. But man, you have to hope that this is a blowout if you're going to start Tajay Spears because he is favored in blowouts. Now, in all games but one, he's had over 4 targets, so that is in your favor in a PPR format. He's kind of becoming like this team's version of Jaylen Warren a little bit, But again, not a player I'm super excited to start. If I have better options, I'll definitely go that way. The third matchup that we'll look at today is the Commanders at the Falcons, and this is the start of the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate. Brian Robinson is a must start for me. He goes up against the Falcons, and this is a tough matchup. Falcons gave up the 3rd fewest points to the position. Here's what we know, though. In games where the Commanders are being blown out, B-Rob will end up being an awful start. But in games where the script is neutral, he is a fine start. In the game versus the Falcons this week, I personally believe that this will be a competitive game for both of these teams. I don't see either of these teams really being blown out in this game. Through 5 weeks, Brian Robinson is averaging 15.6 touches per game and 14 PPR points per game. He's an RB13 on the year. You should start this guy unless you have clear better options. As for Gibson, just not a player I'm really looking to start. The only way he's even an okay start is if they're being completely blown out. For the opposite side of the ball, the Commanders are middle of the pack as a matchup, but Bijan Robinson is a must start in every matchup. He has the talent to overcome any sort of matchup that he faces. RB7 on the year. I know it was disappointing in week 5, but get ready for a bounce back here versus the Commanders. Through 5 weeks, 18 touches per game, including almost 5 targets per game for Bijan. So this should be a bounce back game for him. We know how talented he is. Don't overthink it. Bijan is a must start in your lineups. As for Tyler Algier, after his 24-point game in week 1, we made a sell high video on this channel. I believe that Bijan was going to get more and more involved. Tyler Algier's role would get less important to this team, and he just wouldn't be a good fantasy asset. He isn't a target earner, and since week 2 onwards, he's averaging under 5 PPR points per game. I think most people are going to have a better option. I put him as a risky start. I don't think I'm going to start him personally. That's up to you guys. All right, the fourth matchup we're going to look at is the Vikings at the Bears. 49.5 point over under, and the Vikings are favored away. This will be a good game. I'm really excited for this game. This is the second highest over under according to Vegas. So we should see a lot of fantasy points, hopefully, from this matchup. I don't have the wide receivers this week, but I am so excited to start Jordan Addison with Justin Jefferson likely out. But for the running backs, Alexander Mattison is absolutely a must start in week 6. The matchup is fantastic. The Bears give up the 3rd most points to fantasy running backs. And since the Vikings traded for Cam Akers, check this out. Mattison is averaging 18.7 touches per game, 4.8 yards per attempt. He's been efficient, and 13.6 PPR points per game. He's the RB12 in that time span. He has played much better since this team decided to add some real competition. And this year, his matchup versus the Bears have given up 26 points to Aaron Jones, 21 points to Rachaad White, 16 points to Isaiah Pacheco, and 19 to Jaleel McLaughlin. They currently allow 27.2 PPR points per game to the running back position. Without Justin Jefferson, maybe Alexander Mattison is going to be even more involved in the air. Regardless, if he gets even half of what the Bears currently give up to running backs in PPR points, then you will be happy with starting him. As for Cam Akers, his role could grow, but at this very moment, 29% of the snaps for the last 2 weeks since he was brought over by this team, hasn't had over 7 touches a game. So there's no reason to believe that that is going to change just yet. For the Bears side of the ball, this is a little bit difficult to wrap our head around at the time of recording this video. Because we know Khalil Herbert is going to miss multiple weeks with a high ankle sprain. We know that for sure. That's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle is Rashawn Johnson. What's going on with his concussion? Okay? Because we have never seen someone on a Sunday game have a concussion and come back and play the next week. But Rashawn got a concussion on a Thursday night game. So he will have had over a week's time to recover and get out of the concussion protocol. If Rashawn Johnson is playing in this game, he becomes a must start for me, regardless of the Vikings being a good run defense so far through 5 weeks. At the time of recording, again, we don't know though. So I'm doing my best to put the pieces together with what I expect will happen. I think he could come out of concussion protocol and play. If he does, he's a must start. In every game this year, Rashawn Johnson has had more snaps, more touches, more yards, and more fantasy points than D'Onta Foreman. In fact, D'Onta Foreman, because of Rashawn Johnson, has been a healthy scratch since week 2. Okay? So if Rashawn Johnson is playing, you start him. He's a top 24 play for me this week. If he's not playing, then D'Onta Foreman automatically becomes a volume play. He will step in as the RB1 for this team. He's a risky start because I don't think he's as talented as the other 2 backs there. But we have seen last year with the Panthers, he was a fine spot start with volume. So it all depends on what sort of, reports we get. Hopefully we find some more clarity as we head towards the week. All right, the 5th matchup we're going to look at here is the Seahawks at the Bengals. This should be a fun one. 43.5 point over under. I have a feeling this is going to hit the over. 43.5 seems a little low for these 2 teams. Maybe that has something to do with the Bengals struggling, but I think they're going to hit the over for this matchup. The Bengals are favored at home, by the way. I'm not sure many people would have guessed that. But as for the Seahawks side of the ball, you have to start Ken Walker. He's averaging 18.5 touches per game, and he's been uber efficient. Okay? Walker and Etienne aren't that dissimilar in the way that they run the ball. Now, Walker's a more physical runner, But both of these guys are kind of grinding it out, and then at any moment, they could rush for a 70-yard touchdown. They have that game-breaking speed or trait to their skill set. Charbonnet's snap percentage is growing every week, but the good thing is Kenneth Walker's touches haven't taken a hit. He's still as involved with the opportunities that he's getting as before. You have the perfect combination with Ken Walker. Volume and talent. You got to start this kid regardless of the matchup. Bengals give up the 14th most points to the position. And as for Charbonnet, I'm still excited about him as a handcuff. Still a player that I like in Dynasty, but at this very moment, he shouldn't touch your starting lineups until he's proven more to us. On the opposite side of the ball, the Bengals, they have Joe Mixon, obviously, and pretty much nobody else, right? Mixon is a volume play. He's been okay this year, RB16 so far, but only averaging 12 points per game. There are two sides to that coin, though, okay? Yes, he's been average. This team has been average, but he is the RB16 despite this team's offensive struggles. If this team gets back to being a top 10 points per game offense, what could Joe Mixon be for fantasy football? Because the good news is there is no competition at all for Joe Mixon. So far in 2023, check this out. Joe Mixon has the 8th highest snap percentage. He's playing 75% of the snaps. His rushing attempt share, the attempts that he's getting compared to the rest of his team, 79.2% of his team's attempts. That is first in the NFL. No one's getting more of their team's rushing attempts than Joe Mixon by percentage. And his expected fantasy points per game, he's currently 4th in that category. And that's just a category that fantasy points data gathers based on your yards per carry, the offense that you're in, touches, expectations per touches, goal line opportunities, if you're getting targeted, depth of target, that kind of thing. And Travion Williams, we're not even going to talk about him. He's averaging less than 2 touches per game. So Mixon is a volume play, and he should be in your lineups unless you have a clear, better option. The 6th matchup we're going to look at here today is the 49ers at the Browns. The over-under is 41.5, and the 49ers are favored. Let's hope that Deshaun Watson is playing in this game, because otherwise it's going to be a very boring game to watch. But do we need to talk about Christian McCaffrey? RB1, you start him. You don't need to hear me say that. He is the only running back that you can start, and he is the number 1 running back anyone would want to start anyway. The other side of the ball is what we need to talk about. The Browns, okay? The Niners are 24th in points allowed to the running back position for fantasy, so this is a tough matchup. And Jerome Ford, he's in a weird situation, man. I put him as a risky start. What concerns me for Ford is the lack of efficiency and yardage so far as a starter. Now, to be fair, he's had some tough matchups, okay? Versus the Titans and the Ravens. Those are good run defenses. But through the time as a starter, weeks 3 and 4, check this out. In those 2 games, he is 58th in yards per attempt, not efficient on the ground. Rushing yards per game, he's 30th, not even over 50 yards per game as a starter. Explosive run percentage, these are the percentage of his attempts over 15 yards. He is 41st, only 4% of the time he's got an explosive run over 15 yards. Missed tackles forced per attempt, he is 35th in the NFL. Now, there's a sign of hope here because his yards after contact per attempt, he is 13th. He's pretty good in that number. So you could make a case, maybe in better matchups, he will be more efficient. This isn't one of those better matchups, though. The Niners, think about it. Tony Pollard was just shut down. Can Jerome Ford really overcome it? I'm not sure. Just keep in mind that 42% of Jerome's fantasy points this year have come from touchdowns. So if you don't get a touchdown, you might not be excited to start Jerome Ford. And as for Kareem Hunt, this isn't a guy that you can start. Hasn't averaged over 22% of the snaps so far. There's no way he should be touching your lineups. All right, the 7th matchup we will look at today is the Saints at the Texans. The over-under is 40.5, and the Saints are favored. It's not a very high over-under. Vegas does not expect many points from this matchup. For the Saints side of the ball, this is a fantastic matchup. Alvin Kamara is a locked and loaded, beautiful start this week. Texans are 6th in points allowed to the position, and Alvin Kamara has been a monster since returning from suspension. Since returning, he's averaging a whopping 25 touches per game, over 20 PPR points per game, and is the RB7 per game in that time span. Kamara is currently, get this, on track for 119 targets, and he missed 3 games. If you drafted Kamara or maybe you traded for him, you were sitting on a gold mine so far. Kendre Miller, a rookie that I'm excited about, but the only reason he got work last week is because they were dominating the Patriots. I think this will be a more competitive game, and Kendre, unfortunately, should be sat on your bench. For the opposite side of the ball, the Saints are a pretty good defense so far against running backs. 28th in points allowed. 28th meaning they are the fifth worst matchup, for running backs. Dameon Pierce, so far in 2023, against this team, the Saints, they've allowed 13 points to Derrick Henry, 7 points to Miles Sanders, 3 points to A.J. Dillon, 11 points to Rachaad White, and last week, this defense that Dameon Pierce is facing allowed just 2.4 points to Ramondre Stevenson. So far, Dameon Pierce has not been able to overcome tough matchups in fantasy, and it makes it worse that he's not really involved in the air. When you combine his 2.4 targets per game, the identity of this offense is now a passing offense, and his inability to overcome tough matchups, it gets really difficult to get excited for Dameon Pierce. You know, he's kind of a fringe top 30 play for me this week. The only scenario I start him is if he's my clear best option, because it's not really a matchup I'm excited about. And if the Texans are to win this game, I think it'll be through the air. Now, of course, if Dameon Pierce falls into the end zone, he gets goal line touch, then your weekend is saved. But what if that doesn't happen? You're probably not happy that you started him based off of his yardage and his efficiency in this matchup. All right, the 8th game we're going to look at here is the Colts at the Jaguars. 46-point over-under, and the Jags are favored at home. For the Colts side of the ball, this is a tough matchup. The Jags are 27th in points allowed. So they give up the 6th fewest points to the position. This is a tough defense so far for running backs. We have to acknowledge that this Colts backfield, this whole situation is difficult to digest at the moment, okay? I'm not even going to sit here and on this video and lie to you that I know exactly how it's going to play out, because at the time of recording, I really don't know. Zach Moss is playing out of his mind and just dominated one of the NFL's best run defenses in the Tennessee Titans last week, okay? However, Zach Moss isn't the running back that this team just paid $42 million to over the next 3 years, okay? Jonathan Taylor just got the bag, should eventually take over this backfield, but when will he be fully healthy? Keep in mind, he played just 15% of the snaps last Sunday. He is at minimum a 60% snap player when he's healthy for this offense. So we have to navigate where we are now, what we currently know, what we've seen, till when does JT become that 60% full go player for this offense? So what you're seeing right now on your screen, I am naming Jonathan Taylor a must start. Hear me out, okay? Don't call me an idiot in the comments yet. I'm saying he's a must start because I'm assuming we hear a similar report to what Robert Saleh said last week for Breece Hall, in that Jonathan Taylor will be a full go this week. Hasn't happened yet. If that report comes out, Jonathan Taylor's a must start. If a report comes out that Jonathan Taylor will be limited again, similar to last week, he moves to being a risky start, and Zach Moss becomes the must-start player. In this scenario in which the Colts keep JT on a snap count, you absolutely could start Zach Moss. We are talking about a player that's averaging 24.8 touches per game since week 2. He's the RB6 in fantasy football so far. It's crazy. However, I strongly believe, and I think you would agree with me, that when JT is fully healthy, Zach Moss will end up being pretty much a dead asset for fantasy football. Still will be a good player, but he won't be a viable starting option when JT is back and, fully healthy. So that's how we're going about that. We need to rely on reports this week. If JT is limited, Zach Moss is a start. If JT is full go, JT is the start in this backfield. For the Jags side of the ball, it's a pretty good matchup. Colts give up the 12th most points to the position. You're starting Travis Etienne. Proved once again why he is one of the league's best young running back talents in week 5 versus the Buffalo Bills. Regardless of matchup, Etienne, similar to Kenneth Walker, has game-breaking potential. on one touch, this guy could take it to the house. And through 5 weeks, he's averaging over 23 touches per game. That's an elite number. 108 total yards per game and 18 PPR points per game. You got to put Travis Etienne in your lineup regardless of what the matchup looks like. And Tank Bigsby, you know, all those people who said he was going to take the job, I mean, you guys know who you are. I'm not going to put anyone on blast. You know who you are. Those people are probably now accepting that might have been wrong. He's averaging 3 touches per game so far, and clearly this is Etienne's backfield unless an injury occurs. Okay, the 9th matchup that we're going to look at is Panthers at the Dolphins. So for the Panthers side of the ball, there's not a confident start for me on this team. Dolphins are a fine matchup. They're middle of the pack, but Miles Sanders doesn't look to be healthy. He's got that groin injury. He's averaging less than 10 points per game so far in the year, and this offense can't run the ball to save their lives. And he's splitting touches down the middle with Chuba Hubbard, who is the more efficient back, but he's only averaging about 7 points per game in fantasy. I just don't think there's a starter here. I would say this, 90% of people out there have a better starting running back on their roster than Miles Sanders or Chuba Hubbard. That's just the reality. As for the Dolphins side of the ball, if Devon Achane plays, at the time of recording, I don't know what's going on with his knee, okay? If he plays, if he suits up, he is a lock into your lineup. He's been a genuine superstar so far in 2023. He is first in yards per attempt, averaging 12 yards per attempt. Think about that, guys. Every time Devon is touching the ball, he's averaging a first down. 12 yards per attempt. His explosive run rate runs over 15 yards. He is first in the NFL at 18.4%. Missed tackles forced per attempt, he's 6th. And yards after contact per attempt, he's 3rd amongst running backs. This dude is a superstar budding in front of our eyes. Now, as for Raheem Mostert, he's still a start even if Achane plays, because this matchup is fantastic. The Panthers are the second best matchup for fantasy running backs. They give up the second most points to the position. So again, if Achane is playing, you still start Mostert. Now, in the scenario in which Devon Achane does not play this week, Raheem Mostert becomes a top 10 play at the position. So if Achane's out, Mostert is one of the best starts you could have this week. Keep in mind that in games where Achane doesn't suit up, so far, Raheem Mostert is averaging 19.4 PPR points per game in games where Achane has less than 10 touches. Now, Jeff Wilson is interesting, but he's not a player that I would feel comfortable starting just yet, and we don't even know if he's going to play at the time of this recording. The 10th matchup that we're going to look at today is the Patriots at the Raiders. Unfortunately, some poor souls are going to buy tickets to this game, and they're going to have to watch the Patriots at the Raiders. This is the start of the afternoon game slates. Over-under is 42.5 points, and the Raiders are favored. Makes sense, because this might be the worst Patriots team we've seen in the last 30 years. I mean, genuinely. But as for the Patriots, Raiders are a fine matchup. They're about middle of the pack. But man, call me crazy. I'm not sure there's a clear start here, guys. I'm really not sure. Like Ramondre Stevenson, he's been truly awful. And I know that the offense as a whole has been bad, but Ramondre's been a huge part of that, guys. He's been one of the worst running backs in the NFL. Now, maybe I'm biased because this is a running back that I've been telling you guys to sell since before the season. Similar to Derrick Henry, he's been a sell. But I think the numbers back this up. In 2023, Ramondre Stevenson is 82nd in yards per attempt, 2.7 yards per attempt. He has 0% explosive run rate. Hasn't had a single run over 15 yards, 89th in the NFL. His missed tackles forced per attempt, he is 71st. And his yards after contact per attempt, he is 92nd in the NFL. This is not the same Ramondre that we've seen in the past. I'm not saying he's dust, but he is nowhere near the efficient player that he used to be. He's not involved like he was in the air previously. I mean, we're talking about a guy who just scored under 3 points versus the Saints. Now, maybe this is the matchup where he bounced back, but I certainly don't feel like he's a top 30 play or a top 30 guy in my rankings heading into this week. I'm not sure where that confidence could come from where people have, from what we've seen with this offense. As for Zeke, he's in the same boat. He's not efficient. He doesn't look good. But last week, He almost got 50% of the snaps. So we're seeing Ramondre's opportunities come down, Zeke's come up. No one's efficient. The offense is awful. I don't want to start either of these guys. Like, that's why they're risky starts. They're must sits if you have better options. As for the Raiders side of the ball, the Patriots have been a pretty good matchup. They allow the 10th most points to the position. This is easy though. Josh Jacobs is a must start. He's averaging 22 plus touches a game. He's coming off a 20-point performance on Monday Night Football. He's averaging 15.6 points per game on the year, and he's averaging 24 points per game since I told you to go trade for him in week 3 on this channel. Volumes for day and not a soul to compete with. You start Josh Jacobs, okay? You don't need to overthink that one. The 11th matchup that we'll look at is the Lions at the Buccaneers, 45.5 point over under, and the Lions are favored away. How about this, Detroit fans? You guys are favored away from your home. That is awesome to see. But as for the Lions side of the ball, this is a matchup that isn't ideal, but you have to start David Montgomery. He is unquestionably a must-start player. They have found their identity, and that is in the run game with David Montgomery. He is that, I said it last week, that bite your kneecaps type of player that Dan Campbell has been looking for, and he's finally behind a really good offensive line. Over 20 points per game in both of the last 2 weeks, over 25 touches per game in both of the last 2 weeks. Even if Jahmyr Gibbs is back, Montgomery is a must start. He is 8th so far in scoring amongst the running back position. Now, as for Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm going to put him in the must start category as well. If he plays, I think he should be in your lineup because there are not 24 running backs that I feel better about heading into this week. I know it's not been great. Only one game over 10 points so far this year. But last time he played, we saw him get 5 targets. He caught 4 of them. And they're still figuring out how to get this guy involved, okay? It's a matchup versus the Bucs where maybe the defense is actually holding up the run and you need to get the ball out in creative ways. Either way, Jahmyr Gibbs, we know how talented he is. I think most people would need to start him as a low-end RB2. For the Bucs side of the ball, we're starting Rachaad White. Rachaad White is dominating touches. He's dominating snap percentage. Sean Tucker is not a threat to him whatsoever. This is similar to Joe Mixon in Cincinnati, Josh Jacobs in Las Vegas, in the sense that there is no competition for a guy like Rachaad White. So while it's a really bad matchup, based off of volume, if you have White, unless you're in like an 8 or a 10-man league, he probably should be in your lineup. All right, the 12th matchup that we are going to look at today is the Cardinals at the Rams. A 46-point over-under, and the Rams are favored. I'm probably going to say this wrong. Amari DeMarcado, he would be a must-start for me if Keontae Ingram misses time, okay? Now, even if Keontae Ingram plays, I don't think he'll be 100%. He's been dealing with a neck injury, so even if Keontae comes out and plays, unless there was a report that says he'll be the starter, then I think I would still prefer Amari in this matchup. Last week, when James Conner went down versus the Bengals, which are a decent, defense, DeMarcado had 12.7 PPR points, averaging 4.5 yards per carry. So this is a running back that's got some juice out of TCU, undrafted guy wanting to prove himself. Now, the matchup isn't that good, but based off of the volume he should see, if Keontae Ingram misses time, he becomes a player that you can spot start. If you're in a tough position, bye weeks, you got Aaron Jones on bye or Najee or Jalen Warren, DeMarcado can slip into your lineup as a top 30 play, a flex type of, potential for him. As for the Rams side of the ball, I'm expecting a big bounce back for Kyren Williams in week 6. This is a great matchup. The Cardinals give up the 4th most points to the position. And the good news for Kyren is he's still dominating the opportunities in this backfield. In week 2, 95% of the snaps. In week 3, 100% of the snaps. And 84% of the snaps versus the Eagles in week 5. He's still getting targets, maybe not as many as we want, but he still got 15 touches last week in a game where Cooper Kupp came back. So you have to start Kyren Williams, RB5 on the year. Okay, the 13th matchup that we will look at today is Eagles at the Jets. This one's really simple. 42.5 point over under. By the way, the Eagles are favored as they should be. But this one is very simple. You start DeAndre Swift. and you start Breece Hall. Now for Swift, it's obvious the Jets are a good matchup, right? And he's behind probably the best offensive line he will ever be behind in his entire career. I mean, you could fit multiple city buses through those holes. Honestly, I mean, 6 of me could fit through the holes that they're putting up there in Philly. Now, as for the Jets, it's a tough matchup. The Eagles are currently the second worst matchup for running backs. However, this is no longer a situation for Breece Hall where we are relying just on efficiency. We now get the volume. Guys, last week, Breece Hall, 25 touches, over 28 PPR points. 25 touches. He didn't have anywhere near that amount of opportunities so far this year. Meanwhile, Dalvin Cook, only 6 touches last week. Dalvin Cook is irrelevant. And Michael Carter, 4 touches last week. Breece Hall is this offense. So the volume will be there. He's an explosive player. You got to start him even though it's a bad matchup. Now we've finally gotten to the Sunday night football slate. Okay, so do me a favor. Go ahead and smash that like button for me. Easy way to help the channel grow. If you want to support what we're doing, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe. It's just been awesome. We're on the road to 10K, and man, we're getting close. We appreciate you guys. Sunday night football, Giants at Bills. Again, this is another very simple matchup. The over-under is 48 points. The Bills are favored. The largest spread in any game. The Bills are huge favorites, which means that Vegas thinks that they're going to put up a lot of points. So for the Bills side of the ball, you start James Cook. I know it was a bad matchup or a bad game last week, but this team was down and they didn't feel a need to run the ball. They will not be down versus the New York Giants, So James Cook will have a better game, and you just can't start Damian Harris or Latavius Murray. As for the Giants, the hope is that Saquon Barkley plays. I believe Saquon plays, and if he does, you can start him. Okay, oddly enough, the Bills are pretty average this year. They give up the 7th most points to the running back position in fantasy. Last time Saquon Barkley played, he had over 27 PPR points. You can see week 1 versus the Cowboys, a better defense. He had about 10 points. So let's say somewhere in between 10 to 15 points you can expect for Saquon Barkley. But we know how talented he is. He's got to be in your starting lineup. Hopefully he does play. And the last game we'll look at is Monday Night Football, Cowboys at Chargers. This is an exciting Monday Night Football game. Cowboys looking to bounce back from being embarrassed. Chargers looking to continue their winning as they come back from bye. Healthy. There'll be an Austin Eckler out there. He's a must start. Keep in mind, Austin Eckler in week 1 versus the Dolphins, over 26 PPR points. He played 51% of the snaps. 51% of the snaps, over 26 points. Eckler is going to retain his league-winning status when he comes back this week against the Cowboys. I know it's a bad matchup, but that guy is matchup proof, especially with what he can do through the air. Keep in mind, this team has no Mike Williams. Last year, Eckler was a target hog because of injuries to the wide receiver room. We could see that again this year. As for Tony Pollard, I am expecting a bounce back. He is absolutely a must-start player. Still a top 10 guy in usage, still dominating touches, snaps, opportunities. The only reason Rico Dowdle even got opportunities last week is because they pulled the starters in like the fourth quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter. Pollard is still the guy there, unquestionably. He's averaging 20 touches per game. And this is a much better matchup. The Cowboys should be in this game, and Pollard should be in your lineups. I'm expecting a plus 15-point game from Tony Pollard here in week 6. So that are all the matchups for this week. My throat actually hurts because I've been talking straight for a little bit over 30 minutes now. I'm sorry the video went a little bit long, but hopefully you appreciated the information. Hey, if you want a way to support the channel, support what me and Badaki do, keep in mind, guys, all the videos that you see, from the ideas, the conceptualizing, to the research, to the video editing, to the recording, to the production, to sound, to graphics, everything that you see, guys, it's just us on the channel. We're doing everything that you see. Anything you put out, anything that we produce, it's us. If you want to support us and you like what we do and you want to keep us going, then go ahead and use our promo code LAND and sign up to the Flock Fantasy website. You'll get 30% off that website. Not only will you be supporting us and our goals and to do this full time, You will also be getting a bunch of perks in return. Great articles from the most incredible minds in the industry. You'll get my weekly rankings at every position. Want to know exactly where I sit with these guys at every position each week? You'll have that over on the Flock Fantasy website. Rest of season rankings, dynasty content, and if you choose the Mother Flocker tier, you'll get the Fantasy Hotline, which is a direct DM to us for advice. So make sure you check that out in the description. DM us if you sign up. We'll get you all hooked up. Enjoy the rest of your week. Go get a W. It's not too late to turn your season around or to keep racking up the wins. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.